Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to my patch 8.2.5 Mythic Plus tank tier list. If you want to know what my definitions are for these different tiers, you can check out a little video I made explaining my definitions for the tier list. It'll be in the description of this video. So let's start off with the S tier. In the S tier of tanks this patch, I have the Brewmaster Monk. The Brewmaster Monk I think is extremely powerful right now. A Brewmaster strength has kind of always been that they don't die quickly. It'll take a little while to kill them because of the way the stagger mechanic works. But a weakness that they've usually had is that they require a lot of healing to be kept up. They'll take damage slowly and smoothly, but more of it than other specs. And that's no longer true this patch because they have an extreme amount of self-healing. Part of that comes from very good raid trinkets this tier. So we're talking about Edicts of the Faithless and Bloodthirsty Urchin. Without those trinkets, I would not put Brewmaster in the S tier. And also from a Gift of the Ox bug. A mechanic of the spec was bugged to be healing Brewmaster more than it should be. And the interaction between Celestial Fortune, a passive they have that makes their crit scale their self-healing, that was interacting very favorably with these raid trinkets and with incoming healing received. So Brewmaster is, normally in Mythic Plus, I think a healthy place for Brewmaster is where they have smooth incoming damage, but they actually require quite a lot of healing. And this patch in particular, they have smooth incoming damage. They're not likely to die all of a sudden, and they also don't require too much healing. Like the healer can just often ignore a Brewmaster, and that is not a place that I think Brewmaster works well when the healer can wait to save them for a couple of seconds, can use a couple of globals to heal somebody else, but then they do have to pump a lot of healing into the Brewmaster, and that's not the way it works right now. Compounding those kind of tankiness issues, Brewmaster also has access to Ring of Peace, which is uniquely powerful with the Beguiling affix that's currently active. Ring of Peace lets you pull Emissaries of the Tides without the packs that they're in, or vice versa. And that is extremely powerful. There are a lot of packs that are annoying with an Emissary of the Tides in it. You don't want to have somebody use crowd control and spam crowd control on it because that costs them one global every 8 seconds, which is a pretty big cost, and that can go awry. And Brewmasters have the ability to just ring the Tides out and pull the pack. And then you can just pull the Tides with a pack that's not problematic to have a Tides in, or with the boss, and that's really strong. So that effect saves a bunch of time throughout the dungeon. So Brewmaster also does very good damage with Conflict and Strife Major in keys. That gives them access to the Hot Trub PvP talent, and that fills another weakness that Spec had earlier this expansion of being relatively low damage. They're now competitive there. And they have the Mystic Touch debuff, where everything they damage takes 5% increased physical damage. That synergizes very nicely with a lot of the other specs that are good right now. Specs like Resto Druid and Outlaw Rogue in the other roles that do primarily physical damage. So all around fantastic spec. And I think that the thing that puts it in the S tier above the A tier is the Ring of Peace against Beguiling. I think without that, even with all the tankiness and self-healing, it would probably only be A tier because there are other good tanks that I think are also competitive. And I think the one that springs most to mind as being an A tier tank is Prot Warrior. Prot Warrior was by far and away the best tank back in Reaping, Season 2 of BFA. But here in Season 3, Prot Warrior's received a couple of nerfs. The nerfs are not catastrophic. It still does very good AoE damage, probably the best of these good tank specs. Spell Reflect is uniquely powerful, and it's insane damage. Like, there are some dungeons where Spell Reflect shaves off minutes off the time. But Prot Warrior, the shield block is extremely strong against physical damage, but magic damage, a lot of magic damage that's not spell reflectable, is very rough for Prot Warriors, especially like Emissary of the Tides. They do non-blockable magic damage with their auto attacks, which really trucks Prot Warriors, so they require a lot more healing this patch than they did last patch. However, that's kind of the only medium-sized weakness that they have. Outside of that, they're still extremely strong, very high damage, very tanky, especially against physical damage. So an A-tier tank, fantastic choice. In the B tier, we have Protection Paladin is my first choice for a B-tier tank. This is a tank that actually has some strengths above the higher tier tanks. There are some places where Prot Paladin does stuff that nobody else can do, Bubble Taunt, and they either can take Bubble Taunt or they can take Light of the Protector, which lets them off-heal people. Sorry, Hand of the Protector, which lets them off-heal people. And that means that they can work in these like zero healer comps in some medium to high keys, which is pretty cool. That's a unique thing that they bring. And then they can also take either Blessing of Protection or Blessing of Spell Warding, which are both also uniquely powerful. And there are some mechanics that changes how they work and lets you do things that no other tank spec can do. Protection Paladin extremely good against Necrotic because they have Bubble and Bop to clear their Necrotic stacks, and that's just a big deal. But they have this problem where Outside of their Shield of the Righteous, which is their active mitigation, when Shield of the Righteous is down, they take very heavy amounts of damage from physical damage, and you can't have full uptime on Shield of the Righteous, so Paladins need to kite. There are some boss fights on Tyrannical where you just don't have your Shield of the Righteous up. Like after the first couple minutes of the fight, you're just going to be running low on Shield of the Righteous charges, and that can be a big problem. The Memory of Lucid Dream Essence, this patch, fixes a lot of this problem for prop Paladins, and that's a big reason why they're up in the B tier now. Without that essence, I would have them much lower. As it stands right now, you often just have to kite while you're getting your Shield of the Righteous charges back up, and that's okay. But it's something that I think holds them back from being a little bit higher up in the tier list. Paladin also has this cool thing going where they can sacrifice survivability for damage in a big way. They can take talents like Seraphim, Blessed Hammer instead of Holy Shield, which is something that, like Holy Shield is something that gives them a huge survivability against magic damage, but they can choose to not take that and instead take Blessed Hammer, which A, helps them kite better, and B, helps them do more damage, so that's very helpful on some weeks. So I'd say Paladin is pretty well suited to, like, there are some affix combos that are rough for tanks, and Paladin usually has an answer to those affix combos with their traits or with their talents or with their essences, and that's pretty cool. That's something that they do that's unique. But really, that the tankiness loss they have outside of Shield of the Righteous is the main thing that I think holds them back from being in the higher tiers. Demon Hunter is another spec that I'm putting up in the B tier. This might surprise some viewers. I've done some keys with Vengeance Demon Hunter, and I'm pretty convinced that they are actually a spec that is being slept on. They are a lot tankier in this patch than they have been for the rest of this expansion. There's a build they can take that's built around the talent Gluttony and the essence Vision of Perfection, and those two combine to basically give them meta uptime. A lot, like 40% of the dungeon or something, they'll be in meta, and that means that they can use meta to be active. Like they can have meta active or demon spikes active for most of a pull, and that means they don't really have any time where they're very squishy. Demon Hunters used to have this problem as tanks earlier this expansion, where just outside of their demon spikes and meta, they would just die to an auto attack. And now Demon Hunter is starting to get to this point where they can just have full uptime of either demon spikes or meta, and that makes them extremely tanky. Unfortunately, that build doesn't do very much damage, and that's the big thing holding it back, I think, from being a higher tier tank. I think if that build did 25% more damage, I would have them up in the A tier. But the fact that they just, I would say this might be one of the tankiest builds that you can be running. It's just, you're sacrificing quite a lot of damage, and you probably can't, other tanks have ways of surviving these hard pulls. But, like, you can see there's clips of Demon Hunters doing, like, hundreds of thousands of HPS on Shadow of Zul. This is one of the best specs against magic damage, which is a big problem for a lot of the other tank specs. And, yeah, all around an excellent build. These guys can also sacrifice survivability to do more damage. But I think that build, so, like, the Spirit Bomb build instead of the Gluttony build, I would have that build. Like, if you couldn't play the Gluttony build, I'd probably have Demon Hunter down in the C or D tiers, because I think that the survivability is really important for the spec in high keys. Down in the C tier, we have Guardian Druids. Guardian Druids, another spec that I think is being slept on. Like, I think that C tier is not a necessary, like, it's not a bad place for a spec to be necessarily, and people can succeed with it. And I think that kind of the community perception on this spec is lower than C. Like, they have it down. The community perception on this might be an F, and that's not really fair. The big problem that Bear has is that they start pulls in their least tanky state. They don't have their Iron Furs rolling, and at the start of the pull, they can just fall over. So they might need to commit things like external cooldowns, like Iron Bark, or they might need to commit some of their Survival Instincts charges to just surviving the first 5 seconds of a pull. And that means that basically any pull in Mythic Plus is going to be scary for them, because either they're going to be low on these defensive resources as the pull continues, or they're going to not use them on pull and just be, very in danger of dying right at the start of the pull. That kind of happens with Guardian Druids. So that is the primary weakness that's keeping them low. They actually do very good damage. They can do very good damage. And they have a couple of powerful strengths. Stampeding Roar, Typhoon, Battle Res on the tank are very powerful things, although the Battle Res is less good because there's an S tier healer that has a Battle Res that we may talk about when we get to the healer tier list. So the main problem with Bear is just the dying on pull problem is something that is hard to fix. And another tank spec, the last one here on the tier list, is Blood Death Knight. Blood Death Knight I'm going to put also in the C tier. So I think that the tank balance here is quite good. I don't believe that we have any tanks currently in the D or F tiers. Blood Death Knight is another spec that I think the community mostly thinks is garbage. And I don't actually think that's fair. I think that from my experience watching some Blood Death Knights play, they are still not in an awful place. So Blood Death Knight's primary problem is that they've had some big nerfs to their tankiness. Their armor has been nerfed dramatically. Bone Storm got a big nerf, and I think that probably the Bone Storm nerf was warranted, and the armor nerf was a little bit much, and has them is the main thing holding them back from being in a higher tier. This is another tank that, like Guardian Druid, dies at the start of a pull pretty often because that is their least tanky time as well, so they might need to commit their big defensive resources or be kiting fairly early in a pull while they're just kind of working on getting Bone Shield charges up. But the kit of the Death Knight, all the numbers would suggest that you have an F tier tank with Blood Death Knight, but the kit is just so well suited to Mythic Plus that I think it actually warrants them being in a higher tier. So things like Death Grip, Battle Res, a ranged kick, Mass Grip. These are things that are so good in Mythic Plus. There's many spots, many dungeons, Motherlode, Toldagor, where having a Death Knight tank lets you do some really cool stuff. Like in Toldagor, you can Mass Grip everything, and that makes the cannon section a lot easier. In Motherlode, you can use Death Grip to bring the mech jockeys to specific Peacekeepers that you want to pilot, and that can allow you to get a lot more count from the earlier sections of the dungeon. So these effects are extremely strong for Death Knight, and Death Grip in general, it's just so good to have on your tank in Mythic Plus. So the kit is really, really well suited for Mythic Plus, and that's what brings them up to the C tier, where the armor value and the tankiness would have them in the lower tier compared to the very tanky other tanks that are currently available. So that's my tier list for tanks in Mythic Plus. All in all, I would say this is a fairly good state of class balance as far as we've seen from Blizzard in Mythic Plus. If all roles were as well balanced as tanks, I would say that would be a good thing. Obviously, we do have an S tier tank, but they've already announced that many of these problems are going to be fixed. With Brewmaster is going to get some nerfs coming next patch, and also Beguiling going away and being replaced with something else is going to remove a lot of Ring of Pieces, unique utility. So with those effects aside, I expect that we'll continue to see this fairly tight grouping of tanks in the tier list next patch, and that's pretty cool. So I would say good job to Blizzard on the tank balance. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, like and subscribe and stuff. Follow my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Dratnos, and let me know what you'd like to see next from these tier lists. Thanks, and bye.